Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from just outside the Palace of Westminster in central London. Coming up on today's show, with Christmas fast approaching, I spent time talking to shoppers just a stone's throw away from where I am on Oxford Street earlier in the week, where cautious spending and a focus on value for money are shaping this year's festive season. While food, celebrations and seasonal goods remain priorities, many are still holding back on big purchases here in the UK, with retailers relying on promotions to attract hesitant customers amid ongoing economic uncertainty. And in a thought-provoking conversation with author and historian Dele Ogun, we discuss the backlash surrounding Kemi Badenoch's criticism of Nigeria. Drawing insights from his book Culprits, we explore how Nigeria's colonial past continues to shape its governance and international image. Then later, in this throwback conversation with award-winning leadership and inclusion expert Obi James, trustee of the Royal African Society, we revisit her powerful insights from her book Let Go Leadership. As we step into the new year, Obi's philosophy offers timely lessons for leaders navigating today's dynamic and uncertain business environment. But first, the UK's Post Office inquiry, which investigated one of the country's largest miscarriages of justice, has concluded after 3 years. The scandal centres around the faulty Horizon IT system, which wrongfully accused over 900 sub-postmasters of financial misconduct between 1999 and 2015, leading to bankruptcies, loss of livelihoods and imprisonment. In closing arguments, former Post Office CEO Paula Venables, Fujitsu, the makers of the Horizon software, and the Post Office each apologised but attempted to deflect responsibility. Ms. Venables, who was not physically present, expressed regret, but claimed she was not fully informed of the extent of the software's failures. Adding to the controversy, UK authorities recently acknowledged that Capture, Horizon's predecessor, may have also caused accounting shortfalls, sparking a fresh wave of concerns for earlier victims. The inquiry's final report, expected in the coming months, will be critical in determining accountability and ensuring such failures are never repeated. In other news, Prince Andrew, the Duke of York and brother to King Charles III, is once again facing controversy after being linked to an alleged Chinese spy who we can now publicly name as Yang Tenbo, banned from the UK on national security grounds. A recent immigration tribunal upheld the UK government's decision to bar Yang, citing his involvement in covert and deceptive activity on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. Documents revealed that Yang gained an unusual degree of trust with Prince Andrew, even engaging in potential business activities. Prince Andrew's office confirmed he ceased all contact with Yang after the government raised concerns. To avoid being a distraction, the embattled royal has reportedly withdrawn from the royal family's Christmas celebrations. Yang denies any wrongdoing. Well, for more on this, I earlier called up with my colleague and our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
I haven't seen you in a while, but since we haven't been talking, lots has been going on. Most notably, I think, is the UK government, Sir Keir Starmer, having to balance a very delicate Chinese spy scandal yet again. And quite surprisingly, it involves Prince Andrew, who appears to be now off the royal family's Christmas Day church list.
Yeah, it's hard to know whether that is in relation to what's happened, but this is quite tough for the Labour government and for Sir Keir Starmer. Just a few weeks ago, he met Xi Jinping and said that they need to have a pragmatic and serious relationship with China. Well, it's quite hard to do that at the moment, in the current days that are coming, because the main story that we've got here is this Chinese spy, alleged Chinese spy called Yang Tenbo, who outed himself as being the person that everyone was talking about. We've got this whole super injunction type thing that was going on. And it's quite a delicate balancing act, as you're saying, because the UK government, more than anything, need growth. They need growth, and a good way to get that is trade with the second biggest economy in the world, China. And for a long time, under the Conservatives, who are pretty hawkish on China, relations were pretty stressed.
They didn't start that way. They were the golden years.
Yeah, well, they had David Cameron, but
Osborne.
More recently, you have a lot of Conservative MPs now who have either been sanctioned or banned from entering China. Ian Duncan Smith, etc., saying there's no way that we can be dealing with China. We need to be, putting a red line in the sand.
They're not comfortable with Sir Keir's closeness with Xi Jinping, are they?
No, and I mean, that would be the same with David Cameron, that would be the same with a Tory Prime Minister. But the problem is we've got this spy scandal. So this was someone who owned many businesses, spent his time between China and the UK up until 2023, when he was banned from entering the UK. The reasons being that the UK MI5 took him aside, took his mobile phone, and said that he was very tied to the Chinese state and to Chinese spy agencies. He got very close to Prince Andrew. He got close to two prime ministers. He's photographed with Theresa May and with David Cameron.
Yeah.
And so it's now opening up this whole can of worms, really, about how secure and safe is our politics.
Kemi Badenoch's sharp criticism of Nigeria's governance has reignited debates about identity, loyalty, and the role of diaspora leaders. Her remarks, describing the country as plagued by corruption and inefficiency, have drawn backlash, including Vice President His Excellency Kashim Shettima's pointed comment that she could remove the Kemi from her name if she is not proud of her heritage. In his book Culprits, historian and author Dele Ogun examines Nigeria's colonial origins and how British imperialism shaped its institutions, a critical backdrop to understanding these tensions. As questions swell about whether Badenoch's comments reflect deeper systemic issues or oversimplify Nigeria's challenges, I took time out with Dele Ogun to explore these themes. Can diaspora leaders like Badenoch critique their countries of origin without damaging national pride? And how can Nigeria and its diaspora bridge the divide between honest criticism and constructive engagement? Dele Ogun, season's greetings. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Real pleasure.
Very cold, grey day in London. And it's been quite cold and grey in terms of social media-wise anyway, for Kemi Badenoch, who works just a stone's throw away from where we're standing. Before we get into the meat of the interview, I just want your general reacts to the storm that Kemi has created. You know her, I've met her. She is a very smart cookie. She doesn't make statements without thinking of the consequences. Why do you think she's decided to go on this path of obliteration of Nigeria?
Well, I think to understand Kemi, and I think I do, is one of the speeches that she delivered in the course of her journey to leadership of the Conservative Party, where she referenced a film titled The Usual Suspects. As there was a quotation that she took from there. She said that the biggest trick that the devil performed on everyone was to convince the world that it doesn't exist. That is Kemi's frame of mind. She's managed to be convinced that the devil of colonialism, of empire, doesn't exist. And this is the context in which to understand the comments that she's making.
Do you really believe that, Dele? Do you really believe that Kemi doesn't believe Britain has a horrific past to apologise for?
Well, you can understand it in this sense, that she studied sciences. Both her parents were doctors.
Yes.
They wanted her to be a doctor.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the subjects she studied. It would have been biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics. She doesn't understand history.
Okay.
And bear in mind, she grew up in Nigeria, primary and secondary school, a country that took history off the syllabus. So it's not her fault. She can't frame these issues in the context in which they belong. So some of the things she's saying are actually absolutely right. I get her. She's speaking from the heart, from what she genuinely believes and understands, that the governance in Nigeria has been, to put it mildly, problematic. That's her experience. That's what she says she ran away from. But she doesn't understand the context.
Yes.
She doesn't understand the role of this building behind us that she's now a principal player in.
You're playing right into the next question.
That's the context.
Exactly, and I want to talk about that. I think our viewers who know you, Dele, and most people watching right now will be familiar with you. You are a very accomplished author. You have a new book out, Culprits, which is why I thought you were the best person to talk about what's happening with Kemi. And you trace within that book our colonial origins and the role that British imperialism played in this backdrop. Do you interpret Kemi Badenoch's harsh criticism of Nigeria's governance in some of that context?
Culprits is the missing link for Kemi. She doesn't understand, because what is culprits? It's about those who occupy the offices that she now occupies. Leaders of the Conservative Party, prime ministers, Churchill, Chamberlains.
Dated 100 years ago, right? It starts.
The construction of Nigeria, the country that she's criticizing, some say denigrating. She doesn't understand that historical context. And culprits, it's all about those who occupy the offices that she's now occupying. So because she doesn't understand the historical framework, that's why her comments will appear to be harsh, but they're not. Some of the things she's saying are the things that we Nigerians have been saying to ourselves.
On WhatsApp, let's be fair.
Let's be fair.
Yeah.
Honestly, we've been whispering it.
Yes.
As far as our government's concerned, it's a whisper and they ignored it. But she's now got a platform and she's saying the very same things, and it sounds like she's shouting it. And that's only because they were deaf to reason. When we were speaking quietly, when the Nigerians are complaining about governance or the policing and all the rest of that, they're not listening. And all of a sudden, because somebody with a platform such as she has is saying it, they said, oh, why are you saying that? It's all embarrassing. So she's a mixed bag. I think that she's speaking from the heart. This is what she genuinely believes, and with some exaggeration in parts in terms of her personal journey, she believes as the true state of governance in the country. So I'm ambivalent. She's got it right to some extent, but she needs the historical context to understand the role of the culprits.
Why is Kemi doing it? I think a lot of us, me included, some of us, backing her, defending her publicly when some Nigerian lawmakers were first enraged by her. But some comments, some of us can't defend. It's even led to the Vice President, His Excellency Kashim Shettima, saying she should drop the name Kemi from her name. Do you think that's fair?
Well, I think it calls to mind something that's often said in the context of Nigerian parents. You beat the child and you expect the child not to cry. She's come through the Nigerian system that many of our peoples, all of our peoples have come through, and it's hurting and they're not listening. And when the child starts to cry at the first opportunity, and she's got the opportunity to shout it out loud, they're saying, you're embarrassing us. You beat the child, you put them in that condition. And more to the point, you're the ones who took history off the syllabus. You're the ones who didn't teach the context that she needs to frame what's going on in Nigeria.
It's readily available out there, isn't there? There's Wikipedia, there's Google, there's AI, there's ChatGPT.
That can only take you so far. It's the reason why I write the books that I write, to fill the gap, such that these people in her position can then understand the context in which it belongs. So her criticism is, I don't regard it as harsh, and I like her rejoinder to Shettima. She says, I've got nothing in common with you. She said, I'm Yoruba, you're Kanuri, the Islamist area. She grew up as a Christian in a Christian household. What have we got in common? And she said, we were lumped together. Now, this underlines the point that I'm making, that she doesn't understand context. She doesn't understand that the culprits who lumped her together with Shettima,
her bosses,
the show that she's running behind us.
Bardeli Ogun, as expected, absolutely fascinating, feasting upon your insights. Hopefully Kemi will listen, and next year will be more favourable between her and Nigeria. So many bridges to be built. All I can say now is Merry Christmas and thank you.
Merry Christmas to you and to your listeners and viewers.
Coming up on Channel's Business Global, in this throwback conversation with award-winning leadership and inclusion expert, Obi James, trustee of the Royal African Society, we revisit her powerful insights from her book, Let Go Leadership. As we step into the new year, Obi's philosophy offers timely lessons for leaders navigating today's dynamic and uncertain business environment. And with Christmas fast approaching, I spent time talking to shoppers on Oxford Street earlier in the week, where cautious spending and focus on value for money are shaping this year's festive season. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from just outside the Palace of Westminster in central London. With Christmas just around the corner, cautious spending is taken centre stage on one of London's busiest shopping streets. Earlier this week, I spent time talking to shoppers just a stone's throw away from where I am now on Oxford Street, where the focus is firmly on value for money.
Out here, I don't know, it's easier to buy. I don't know why. And it's crowded, everything.
I can see you've bought some shoes. Are you spending this year the same as you would last year? Are you buying Christmas presents and cards?
A lot more this year than I did last year. I don't know. I did get a little bit of a bonus, but I think things are picking up.
People are definitely a lot tighter with their money, and cost of living, inflation, it's all a bit crazy recently.
I'm young, so I've come from a point of being younger and not buying anyone Christmas presents because obviously a young student can't really afford it. And then now recently come into the world of earning money, and then you start to spend a little bit more.
I would say I'm spending in the same way, about the same that I do on a daily basis.
Christmas for me is just me and my other half. So just two of us. Not much food, we don't big. We sit around in our pajamas. We don't spend much.
Every time I've come to London, it's felt the exact same. So I wouldn't say that it feels any more Christmassy or people are spending any more money than usual. It just feels normal, I guess, like busy, some rude people.
I feel like Christmas is definitely better in other countries. Yeah, it's not the same here.
And now to my final story. As the year draws to a close, it's a time for reflection and a look ahead to new possibilities in leadership. In this throwback conversation, award-winning leadership expert and trustee of the Royal African Society, Obi James, shares insights from her book, Let Go Leadership. Obi offers a fresh perspective on building trust, fostering collaboration and empowering teams, lessons that are especially valuable as leaders prepare to navigate the opportunities and challenges of the new year. Obi James, it's an absolute pleasure having you on Channel's Business Global. Quite interesting because we speak often, but we've never spoken on the show. So I'm really happy to have you here, particularly because of this time of the year. As we get to the end of the year, a lot of people start reflecting on what's happened, in the past few months. Of course, everybody's looking forward to New Year's resolutions. We're going to talk about your book, Let Go Leadership. I think the title is quite intriguing. Can you explain what letting go actually means in the context of leadership and why it's particularly important for leaders in the world's dynamic business environment?
Thank you very much, Juliana. You're very right. We haven't actually done this before, even though we've known each other for such a long time. So Let Go Leadership is actually covers or focuses on letting go, as you mentioned. And letting go means shifting from this traditional control and command leadership approach to one of empowerment. And one of the things that we find with leaders, particularly as we progress, and as you said, in today's climate, is that there's a tendency to hold on to power. And what a lot of leaders don't recognize is actually what that is doing is holding our people back and holding the future leaders back and making us less equipped for the future. So letting go is actually about sharing power. Doesn't mean letting go of authority. It doesn't mean letting go of shared responsibility. It doesn't mean letting go of accountability. But what it means is actually creating an inclusive environment that allows us to develop the brilliant pipeline of talent that we have within our organizations.
Let's put this in the Nigerian context. You schooled in Nigeria. Of course, you're a trustee of the Royal African Society, so you're familiar with the complex nature of the Nigerian workplace. I'm sure you remember a couple of years ago, Yes, Daddy was trending online, a recording of Peter Obi. And one of the reasons why I think it captured people is because in meetings, people are like, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, 3 bags full, yes, sir. But sometimes that can stifle innovation, that kind of, the hierarchy and women having to know, their place in the workplace. What lessons from your book can help leaders navigate that kind of uncertain environment?
I think Nigeria is a very complex, I'd almost say world. And as you mentioned, I grew up in Nigeria. I actually grew up in a hospital, not as a patient, but as the child of the doctors that run the hospital in Anambra State. So I schooled in Nigeria, and I have been doing a lot of work with Nigerians and in Nigeria recently. And one of the things I see in the work I do in our country is that there is a tendency for leaders to feel like they have to have it all and know it all and be in charge. And that feeds what you describe, which is the yes, ma, yes, sir, people waiting for direction. The impact of that is that we've got leaders that are extremely overwhelmed in an environment where vulnerability is not celebrated or welcomed, and people are holding on to strength and showing that everyone's doing well, everyone's doing great, leaders are brilliant at what they're doing without challenges. And then the consequences is we've got younger people, future leaders, talented team members and teams who are sitting waiting for instructions because they're not empowered to co-create the successes that we need. I think what's even more complex with Nigeria, as we all know, is that we have a young population. 70% of our population is made up of young people. And we do need to change our approach to leadership in order to be able to harness the talent and the diversity and the wisdom, creativity, and innovation that these future leaders have to offer. Let Go Leadership flips that.
Absolutely. We know we're all pretty exhausted now. As I said, we're getting toward the end of the year. And a lot of leaders, particularly, I would say, African women, we often feel as if we need to put on this facade of being, always strong, always in control. Yes, we can do everything, drop the kids here, burn the midnight oil. You feel exhausted. What advice would you give to female leaders who are feeling that they just cannot do it all, but they're scared, because when you're a leader, trust is an issue, isn't it? Being able to hand over your intellectual property. I feel like there is a lot of fear, for dropping the mask and just saying, look, I'm exhausted. Can I have some help? But it's important to ask, isn't it?
It is extremely important. And as we know, women and mothers and carers do need to take care of themselves and of their mental health. And one of the things I say, particularly as a parent, which is the biggest, one of the biggest forms of leadership, is that we need to normalize the challenges that you describe. And we need to be able to bring our children and our future leaders into our world for them to understand that they don't have to be it all and they don't have to do it all. And it's okay to ask for help because actually there's a lot of burnout. We're finding that particularly in our African communities with women in a lot of cases, because everybody else seems to be doing really well. Yeah. People are dressed up, people are glamorous, people are, the social
got the wig on, the lashes on, lipstick on.
The lashes on, the makeup, and actually behind the scenes we're struggling and it's really complicated. And I worry that we're not letting our children understand that actually there are challenges with creating this life. There are challenges with leadership, but actually we can navigate them effectively. And to navigate them effectively, we need to come together more like we've been doing.
I feel quite fortunate because I may have had an early copy of your book in the summer. Since then, you've travelled the world. You've been in New York, you've been in Scotland, delivering speeches and courses to leaders on the C-suite. What have you learnt? And what advice would you give to anybody who is watching, possibly on a C-suite or aspiring to be there, but it's just kind of stuck in the rut? First, tell me what you've learned since writing the book and speaking with people, but also just give us some hope to end the show on.
I will try, no pressure. One of the biggest lessons I actually learned in writing the book, which was initially called Get Out of Your Team's Way, is actually that our leaders need us to look at them with a lot more compassion than we do. Yeah. There is a tendency for us to think that leaders know and are equipped to lead in a different way, in a way that works for the societies that we live in today and the challenges that we face in today's climate. But actually, our leaders are leading how they were taught how to lead. And so that they're copying what they see, and oftentimes they don't get the feedback. So when I started writing the book, one of the things that I changed very quickly following some of my travels, but also interviewing leaders across the world, is actually understanding that there is a need for self-leadership.
Here, here, let go, let God. Thank you, Obi James. Of course, you wear several hats: corporate consultant, leadership coach, accountability coach, trustee at the Royal African Society, and of course, author of Let Go Leadership. Really fascinating insights there from you. Thank you so much, Obi James.
Thank you so much, Juliana. And I look forward to seeing you when we get together again.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for you today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Merry Christmas.